But that's not brand-aligned thinking, Elara. Julian Croft's voice sliced through the still air like a blade. It was cold, sweetly artificial, carrying the cadence of contempt from a man who knew he held all the power. The Aara Market wine cellar gleamed like a lavish cathedral of consumerism. The air was kept at the perfect balance, cool enough to preserve the flavor of aged vintages, warm enough to make VIP guests comfortable when descending for a tour. Bottles of Bordeaux, Burgundy, and Napa Valley rested in polished oak cradles, their necks catching the soft golden glow of crystal chandeliers. Everything was arranged to suggest permanence, flawlessness. But the air was taut, like a violin string about to snap. In the midst of this opulence, 4 employees stood around crates of nearly expired food: artisanal bread, organic milk, seasonal produce. All still good, with 3 days left before the best buy date. Elara stood tall, her clear eyes reflecting the light, her hands gripping the edge of the carton. Her face was not sharpened by combativeness, but carved with a quiet resilience like stone, the kind of face one could not easily dismiss. "Julian," she said, her voice steady, never raised, flowing like a stream in the dark. "Families at the shelter rely on this food. It's still good. This is our promise, not just a procedure." Silence followed. Julian's smile curled, but never touched his eyes. Adjusting his navy silk tie, he glanced around the cellar, as though searching for consensus from the others. His Italian leather shoes clicked softly against the cold tiles. "Donating items near expiration," he said slowly, "makes people think Aara Market is just clearing out shelves. We sell purity, distinction. Perception is everything. Brand value is what we protect." Liam, broad-shouldered but worn down, lowered his gaze. His grip tightened on the cart handle until his knuckles whitened. Beads of sweat formed on his temple, though the cellar was cool. He wanted to speak, but the heavy shadow of bills, his child's tuition, and the threat of unemployment pressed him silent. In the far corner, Art, the old man in a faded beige shirt, continued polishing crystal glasses as if detached. Yet through the lenses, Arthur Sterling's eyes recorded everything, like a camera on slow capture. His trembling fingers betrayed not age, but the fury of restraint. He had once written, with his wife, the company's motto, "Kindness is the standard, not the exception." Now it lay crushed beneath Julian's gleaming shoes. Julian stepped closer to Elara, closing the distance to 1/2 meter. His breath carried the scent of expensive coffee and mint. Lowering his voice, sharper than any blade, he said, "We don't pay you to have a conscience. We pay you to follow directions." His finger tapped lightly against her name badge, each tap punctuating his authority. "Consider your direction to be towards that door. You're done." The words thundered into the air. The cellar sank into deadly silence. Elara did not cry. She did not protest. She drew a long breath, slowly removed the teal apron embroidered with Aara Market's logo, folded it neatly, as though handling a keepsake, and laid it atop the carton. The gesture carried more gravity than any speech. As she turned to leave, the chandelier light caught the silver chain at her neck, a small pendant etched with a phoenix. An heirloom from her mother, who had taught her that kindness never loses. The glint flared like a spark in the cold cellar, blinding to those long accustomed to shadows. She walked slowly. No one dared look up. Liam still hung his head, vision blurred with shame and fear. A young woman clenched her fists, nails digging deep into skin. No one spoke. All are bound by the invisible chain called fear of losing a job. The cellar door shut behind Elara with a soft click, a simple sound, yet it struck like a hammer against the porcelain glaze. A crack had opened, and through it, light began to seep. The cheap rented room was barely half the size of the executive office he once commanded. Stained walls bore old watermarks, and the neon light overhead flickered like a feeble heartbeat. Yet within this poverty, the room had become a secret command center. Pinned to the wall opposite the single bed hung a wooden board cluttered with sticky notes, surveillance photos, and flowcharts marked in red ink. Each scrap of paper was like a diseased bone in a failing body, and he, Arthur Sterling, now reduced to art, was the doctor trying to diagnose the tumor growing inside his own creation. He sat at a rickety wooden table, fingers tapping slowly against a cup of cheap coffee. Before him lay the newest note, scrawled in hasty but resolute handwriting. Elara Vance, terminated for integrity. The words burned red into his mind. He circled them, the pen stroke heavy, carving a fresh scar into the board. A memory surged back, 30 years earlier. He and Eleanor, his wife, sat in a small Brooklyn diner, scribbling the first words of what would become Aara Market's guiding philosophy on a napkin. Kindness is the standard, not the exception. Eleanor had smiled, her hair tumbling across her brow, and said, "We'll build a place where kindness isn't a bonus, but the foundation." Now that memory flickered in him like a candle barely alive in a darkened room. Arthur closed his eyes. His pain was not only that the company had been bent into something false, but that his final promise to Eleanor, to guard the soul of Aara Market, was being torn apart. For the next 2 days, he donned again the disguise of art, the aged custodian and glass polisher, to continue observing. And he saw other cracks, each like a hollow bell tolling in an empty cathedral. One morning, at the coffee counter, he heard Julian snap, "We don't give away food here." A young barista froze, hands trembling as she held out a cookie to a crying boy of about 4, clinging to his mother's coat. Julian snatched the cookie back, tossed it in the trash, and his fake smile reappeared instantly as a wealthy customer stepped forward. The following day, Arthur overheard Liam whisper into his phone, "I'll be home soon, I promise." Moments later, Julian flung Liam's leave request onto the desk with a smirk. "Your kid being sick has nothing to do with this week's KPIs." Liam's voice cracked. His eyes darkened, but he only nodded, his fingers digging crescents into his own skin. Aara Market still glittered. Marble walls gleamed and shelves stood neat like perfect sheet music. Customers strolled among fresh produce to the soothing hum of jazz. They felt the luxury, but not the warmth. Employees smiled, but their smiles ended at their lips, never reaching their eyes. The store resembled a grand cathedral with its vaulted ceilings shining in light, but inside, faith was absent. What Arthur heard were not hymns, but the fractures of a soul. Late on the second night, Arthur sat in a battered rental car parked a block from the store. Through the windshield, he saw Aara Market glowing like a false jewel. Inside, shadows moved, bent under the rhythm of invisible pressure. He picked up his phone, hesitated a second, then dialed the only person he still trusted. A crisp yet warm female voice answered, "Helen." Arthur leaned back against the seat, his voice dropping low, as though each word weighed more than the air itself. "Helen, it's a tumor, and it's wearing a tie." Silence. Then faint keystrokes clicked in the distance and stopped. Arthur drew a long breath, eyes burning with a resolve he had hidden for years. "I'm not here just to observe anymore. We're going to operate, assemble the team. No warning." He snapped the phone shut and let it fall onto the seat beside him. Outside, Aara Market's lights shimmered, but to Arthur, it was nothing more than a hollow cathedral cloaked in counterfeit radiance. And he knew. The storm had been summoned. The next morning, Aara Market opened as if it were any other day. Sunlight spilled across Manhattan, caught in the spotless glass panels, painting a flawless picture. Gleaming fruit displays, the scent of freshly baked bread, high-end customers striding the aisles as though attending a fashion show. No one suspected that in the hush of footsteps, a storm was already converging. A group of people in dark suits appeared at the entrance. They wore no employee badges and offered no polite greetings, only eyes sharp as blades and a demeanor of ice. Leading them was a woman with platinum-cropped hair, her tailored gray suit fitting as if cut with a knife. Helen. Executive Vice President, Arthur's loyal right hand since the earliest days of the company. Julian Croft rushed forward to greet them, that familiar smile, teeth gleaming white like a toothpaste ad. He extended his hand, voice ringing with practiced confidence. "Welcome, I'm Julian Croft, store director. An honor to host the corporate evaluation team." Helen inclined her head slightly, giving a perfunctory handshake. Her face was so expressionless that it was almost frozen. To Julian, though, it was just another stage. He launched into his performance, leading the group through the store, rattling off revenue growth, loyalty metrics, and cost-saving initiatives. Every word coated in sugar, as if Aara Market were the perfect child he alone had molded. "Mr. Croft?" Helen asked coolly, eyes unblinking. "What do you consider your greatest strength as a manager?" Julian didn't hesitate. Maintaining brand integrity at all costs. In the far corner, an old janitor paused mid-swipe. "Art," Arthur Sterling, quickly lowered his head, hiding a bitter smile behind his glasses. Julian's answer was not only arrogant posturing, it was the indictment he had written for himself. While Julian basked in his own performance, Helen's team spread silently across the store. One slipped a tiny device behind the customer service computer. Another combed through inventory logs, scrutinizing every coded line. A discreet pen recorder was placed atop the coffee counter. A subtle tension spread among the staff. They exchanged looks more than words. They didn't dare hope, but something told them the ground was shifting. Liam was called into a small back room for an interview. He sat rigid, hands clasped, palms damp with sweat. The interviewer asked simple questions. "How long have you worked here? How would you describe the work environment?" Liam gave safe answers. "Everything's fine. We always follow procedure." But his eyes betrayed him, weary, desperate. When they briefly locked eyes with Helen's, she understood. His silence was the loudest cry for help. That afternoon, Julian gathered all employees in the cafe area. A space usually filled with customers now resembled an auditorium. The shelves glowed softly in the distance. The scent of roasted coffee hung in the air. Yet the atmosphere was heavy, like a storm pressing down. Julian stood on a small platform. His confident smile spread wide. He believed the evaluation would end with applause. In his mind, Helen and her team would praise the disciplined, efficient environment he had engineered. He thought this was his crowning moment. The back doors opened suddenly. Footsteps echoed slowly across the wooden floor. All heads turned. Elara Vance. She no longer wore the store's uniform. Instead, she came in a simple yet dignified outfit, its dark tones drawing light to the phoenix pendant at her neck. She did not look at anyone, only walked quietly to the last row and sat down. Not a word. Yet the entire room froze. Julian blinked. His smile faltered, a mask fracturing. His face went pale for a fleeting second before he tried to recover composure. Too late. Elara's presence was the largest crack in his performance yet. Helen, seated in front, remained as cold and unreadable as glass. But Arthur, still disguised as Art, set aside his mop, lifting his head. Across his weathered face flickered a spark of resolve. The storm had truly gathered. The only sound in the room was the pounding of hearts. Every employee of Aara Market, from cashiers to stock managers, sat frozen in the cafe, their eyes fixed on the front. Julian Croft stood before them. His smile stiffened, like a glossy coat beginning to peel under heat. A faint noise broke the silence. Art set his mop down, removed his faded cap, and then his reading glasses. In an instant, the face once framed in portraits across the company headquarters came into focus. "Good evening." His voice carried low and steady. No need to shout. "For those who don't know me, my name is Arthur Sterling." The room erupted into whispers. Some gasped, some stared in disbelief. Julian froze, eyes wide, his complexion draining pale. Arthur stepped forward, not sparing him a glance, his gaze sweeping across the rows like a father searching the faces of abandoned children. "I am here not to observe any longer, but to restore the soul of Aara Market." Helen gave a small nod. One of her team connected a tablet to the large screen behind the counter. A cold blue light flared, filling the room with the playback of a recording. "We don't pay you to have a conscience. We pay you to follow directions," Julian's voice, cold, dripping with disdain. Then Elara's reply. "Julian, those families depend on us. This food is good. This is part of our promise." The voices rang out, undeniable. The silence that followed was no longer fear, but anticipation. Helen signaled again, and emails filled the screen. Words Julian had sent to regional managers. Cutting labor costs by eliminating inefficiencies. Removing troublemakers before they spread. Each line struck like a blade, shredding the facade he had so carefully built. Arthur turned to Liam. His voice was not angry, but gentle, urging, "Liam, please tell us what happened with the food meant for the shelter." All eyes were fixed on him. Liam trembled, glanced at Julian, saw the threat in his eyes. "Say it, and you're finished." He inhaled, clenched his hands so tightly his nails bit into skin, then lifted his head and caught Elara's gaze. She gave a small nod, a faint smile like an invisible hand holding his. His voice cracked at first. "We were ordered to destroy all of it. The crates that were dumped, even though the food was still good." A sob rang out. A young woman cried, "He humiliated me too, right in front of customers." An older man added, "I was forced to work through an injury. He threatened to replace me if I took time off." The confessions burst forth like a broken dam, voices merging into a painful chorus, exposing truths buried too long. Julian raised his hand, voice sharp and shaking with panic. "This is a misunderstanding. These are just disgruntled employees." Arthur faced him, eyes cold yet burning bright. "The only thing I misunderstand, Julian, is how someone could take something built on kindness and turn it into a kingdom of fear." His words rolled like thunder, though he never shouted. He signaled, and 2 security staff stepped forward, flanking Julian. "Your employment with Aara Market is terminated, effective immediately. Please escort Mr. Croft out of the building." Julian struggled, but his polished leather shoes slid helplessly as he was led out. The door shut behind him, leaving behind a silence deeper than any before. Arthur turned back to the employees, their bodies still trembling but their eyes alight. Taking the microphone, he called, "Elara Vance, please join me." She walked forward slowly. No applause, only hushed gazes. Arthur handed her the microphone, his tone solemn and resonant. Effective today, Elara Vance has agreed to accept a new role. She will be our first national head of culture and community advocacy. Elara looked out at familiar faces. Liam, the young woman who had cried, the older man, all those who had stayed silent for years. "I don't have a prepared speech," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I only want to work in a place where we can all be proud. A place where kindness is not the ceiling, but the foundation." Her words swept through the room like fresh wind. Applause erupted. Not polite, but liberating, crashing in waves, breaking the darkness that had smothered Aara Market for too long. The reckoning was complete. But it was not the end. It was a beginning. At dawn the next morning, sunlight streamed through the towering glass of Aara Market. The pale golden glow spilled across produce displays and bread counters, wrapping everything in a gentler light. No longer the ostentatious shine of a cathedral of consumption, but the fresh breath of morning after a storm. In the cool wine cellar, once the battlefield of confrontation, a small group worked quietly. No Julian, no cold commands, only a silence that felt easy, purposeful. Elara, dressed simply in a shirt, worked alongside Liam and several others, carefully packing boxes of food, the very crates once ordered destroyed. Now each loaf of bread, carton of milk, and bundle of greens was placed gently in cardboard boxes, sealed with tape. Outside, a shelter truck waited. Words weren't needed. The sound of tape stretching, boxes shutting, and footsteps on tile blended into a symphony of healing. Liam hesitated, then handed Elara a bottle of water. His voice was small, trembling yet sincere. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Elara looked up, meeting his eyes. No longer silent under oppression, but the release of a young father laying down his burden. She smiled softly, her gaze warm as sunlight through glass. "You spoke when the world was listening, Liam. That's what matters." In that moment, a wound was stitched closed, not just his guilt forgiven, but healing for all who had bowed their heads in fear. On the sales floor, Aara Market felt transformed. Staff spoke quietly, sometimes laughing as they guided new hires. Footsteps no longer echoed with dread. Even customers sensed the difference. They were greeted with genuine smiles, real eyes, not the hollow politeness of before. A young cashier showed a trainee how to scan items patiently and kindly. A pastry chef placed a tray of complimentary cookies near the coffee counter, a small gesture, but like a candle relighting warmth long lost. By noon, the doors opened. An older man entered, wearing an ordinary shirt and khakis. No entourage, no security detail. He carried only a small basket, selecting a loaf of brown bread, a few apples, and a jar of honey. Arthur Sterling. He walked slowly, not with the gaze of a CEO, but of an aging father inspecting a home just restored. He saw employees chatting freely, customers at ease. He saw a living store, no longer a hollow temple. At the checkout, he paused. Behind the counter stood Elara, helping a new cashier learn the system. Their eyes met. No words needed, just a nod from him, and a sincere smile from her. Everything was said in that exchange. Arthur stepped back into the midday sun, his figure folding into the city crowd. The camera of imagination did not follow him. It lingered on Aara Market's front doors, where a worker was mounting a small bronze plaque, polishing each etched letter. When the light hit, 4 words shone clear, carved in metal but deeper still in memory. The standard is kindness. The reflection glowed brighter than any luxurious logo. An old chapter closed. a new one opened. Not with trumpets, but with a simple promise. From now on, Aara Market would be a place where kindness was not a slogan, but the standard. You see, in a world where profit often drowns out conscience, there are still those who dare to stand up like Elara. She lost her job for integrity, but in the end, it was that very integrity that changed an entire system. The story of Aara Market reminds us, kindness is never weakness. It is the greatest strength, the fire that can pierce darkness, even in the most polished but empty halls. And perhaps the most important truth isn't engraved on plaques, but carried in daily acts. A genuine smile, a hand offered at the right moment, a brave word spoken aloud. And what about you? Have you ever witnessed a place where kindness was dismissed, or a small moment that changed everything? Share your story in the comments below. Let us remind each other that the true standard will always be kindness. If you believe stories like this should spread, please hit like, leave a comment, share this video with friends, and don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story and ring the bell so you won't miss more stories that touch the heart. Because here at Toch Story, every story isn't just to be heard, it's to be lived, to change us, and to remind us that this world still holds so much good.